The Leica SL3, it injected a lot of excitement in the entire SL ecosystem. You had this camera that felt like a flagship mirrorless solution with a ton of unique differentiators that only this brand could offer. A full frame 60 megapixel BSI sensor with triple resolution technology, a Maestro 4 processor with a revamped autofocus algorithm, improved connectivity for blazing fast transfer of photo and video. The Leica SL3 really felt like a convergence of many things into this sort of ultimate imaging tool. I was fortunate enough to take this camera all over the world and even to places that it's never been to before. And in that time, I've really come to appreciate how much this improves from the Leica SL2. I've also come to appreciate that while this camera is speaking to more people than the Leica M system, it still only speaks to a slim segment of the entire imaging space. So with this review, I want to talk about all the things that I enjoyed using this camera for the work that I do, all the things that it can improve, the ways that the experience can improve in the months and years to come, and most importantly, who should truly consider a Leica SL3 for their journey. Any conversation about the Leica SL3 has to start with the image quality. Here, you're not only getting a lot of resolution, you're getting a ton of information and dynamic range within a RAW file. Like a Division 1 recruit, this camera sits in that upper tier of imaging solutions. And look, a lot of cameras, and especially premium cameras, can deliver a 14-bit RAW file, but the amount of information that can be fit into that container is what makes this camera special. For my recent work in the Arctic, I paired this camera with the SL 100 to 400mm lens. Now, the conditions, they were gonna be colder than a scorned ex-lover and just as unpredictable. Some days you would have bright blue skies and deep dark seas, and other days you would have limited visibility with these bluish gray tones all over. And some instances you were just opening a window and all you would see is white. So this was not something that was meant for entry level or even enthusiast solutions. I needed something that can capture a wide amount of dynamic range and still maintain a good amount of fidelity. I would keep the ISO below 400 for my landscape and abstract work, and the goal was to get as much information in that file so that I can push the colors, and you really can push the colors with these images. Compound this with the 60 megapixels of resolution you have across this full frame sensor, you really are spoiled by this RAW file. Here's the thing though, you can push the ISO much higher when a situation demands it. You know, in these environments where it wouldn't be as bright and I was on a moving boat with a long lens, we would have to jack up that shutter speed. So I'd shoot images at ISO 2500 and still have a ton of information to work with. This is essentially the same sensor as you'd find in the new Leica M11. So it's a sensor that I would feel comfortable shooting with as high as ISO 6400. I will say though, if you're investing in a camera like this, you should really work on your technique and look to shoot in environments where you can keep that ISO low so you can really maximize the dynamic range you'll have in the end to work with. The autofocus system has seen a considerable upgrade from the Leica SL2. Whether it was single point, wide, zone, subject tracking, it has gotten noticeably better where it's faster and more accurate. You'll want to dive in and tweak the settings for the subjects that you are capturing. And look, I'll talk about autofocus performance overall later in the video. The short answer here is that it has significantly improved from the Leica SL2. And that's because you see this new phase detect system that's being utilized with the contrast detect system that was previously there. Well, all in all, it just feels like you're really taking advantage of these SL lenses and their autofocus capabilities with the Leica SL3. The menu system of the Leica SL3 has also seen a monumental change. And you can now tap and hold icons to change them. You can hide more of the information if you just want to see a photograph. As you rotate the camera, all the icons, they rotate as well, and they have more legibility to them. When you go to the control center, this is also cleaned up, so there's less icons to manage, and it just makes for a more pleasant experience. When you're navigating the menus, you're actually navigating downwards, and you can use the touch screen throughout the menus. So it just makes for a better user experience overall. I'll be honest, it never felt like the user interface of these cameras needed a radical change. But with the evolution of this camera and as they were developing it, they saw an opportunity to upgrade this thing. After months of using this camera in different environments, I can honestly say the menu system change is an improvement from the previous version of this camera. It feels like it's a forward-thinking interface and allows you to navigate things much quicker. Because here's the thing, you don't want to spend time in the menus. You don't want to spend time going through sub-pages of context trying to find the thing that you're looking for. You want to be able to get to what you need quickly and efficiently. And especially that ability to press and hold on an icon and change a setting right then and there, well, overall, it just leads to a better consumer experience. Before I jump into the specifics of this camera, I gotta mention the Church Street Foto Club. It's this community that I'm building online where I share a brand new story every week. It's free to join and you'll learn about all my photography adventures from around the world. If you love photography, you're gonna love this community. Now let me talk about the design of this camera. The SL3, it has gotten smaller overall, it's a smaller footprint. The grip, on the other hand, has gotten deeper than it was before. And there was this thing when as I was using the SL3, I was enjoying it. And then I would go and grab my SL2S and I'm like, wait a minute, do I like this better? Does it feel just better in my hand? And I couldn't quite place it because I kept going back and forth. So then I just committed to the Leica SL3 body and used it for months at a time. And it really depends. It really depends on what you prefer. I think this is gonna be 50-50. But for me, I like the new design. I like that it's a smaller profile. I like that it's a deeper grip. It feels more secure when it's not in use and I'm holding it without a camera strap. So I like the direction they've gone in for this. But I can also empathize with people that prefer the older profile and the older grip. Turning on this camera is now done by a button instead of a switch. And at first, this really bothered me because I used to be able to turn on my Leica SL2S without even looking at it. And now you kind of have to look at it to turn it on. I was pushing back, but after months of using it, I think the benefits of this function outweigh the sort of, well, physical elements of having a switch. You can now engage a sleep mode very easily that turns the camera to sleep, saves your battery life, and you can turn it back on when you need to. There's also other indicators that are built into this, and remotely activating your camera without even touching it, that is a feature that's great to have, and I think something that's going to be more useful in the months to come. The only gripe I have with this button is the icon. I feel like we don't need a big power icon on this camera. I feel like if they just removed that icon and the power button was there, people would know what it meant because of the ring around it. So I don't know, maybe it's too late, maybe it's not. We're still in the first year of this camera, but maybe we can just remove that icon and let the users experience a cleaner design. Moving to another design change of this camera, you now have a two-way tilting display, and it just feels natural if you're a photographer, right? Because you're looking down or up at the lens, you're not looking off axis to the camera to create a photo, which just feels weird. There's also IP54 weather sealing even with this tilting display. So you have something that's durable that you can use in all kinds of conditions. There is a bit of a protrusion, but even with the SL2S, the screen just popped out a little bit. So it doesn't feel like it's this obtrusive thing on the back of the camera. And what's nice is that you can easily engage this when you want to tilt your screen. The SL3 has two card slots. You have one that's CF Express Type B and one UHS-2 SD card slot. And the move to CF Express is a welcome one because it opens up the bandwidth of information that can be written from the camera, which is really useful for all the new video functions that this camera provides. But it also improves the ability to offload your footage. So when you're capturing all this photo and video, you can offload it back to your computer, especially if SSDs, much quicker. And this comes at a time where CF Express cards have considerably dropped in price, where they're now on par with premium SD card solutions.
So one of the issues when you're working in freezing temperatures is that your batteries are gonna just drain much faster. And I had that issue yesterday, where I thought one battery would be enough, and in a couple of hours, it was just draining. So to solve this problem, Leica actually has a bit of a unique solution. And I got this idea from Andrea himself. They announced and released a DC coupler. And it's essentially a dummy battery that pops in and it has USB-C on the other side. And with this, I have a little cable running into my jacket on the inside, so it's a bit warmer. And it's plugged into a small rig, 99 watt hour V-mount battery. So, it's all plugged in. If I hit this button, it should turn on. And it did. Look at that. So, I can now essentially have a battery that'll last for days and days. And this is probably the best solution for an environment like this, where you don't have to worry about your battery dying on you, and your camera will continue to operate.
I got to test this camera in temperatures below the -10 degrees Celsius mark, right? This is recommended from -10 degrees Celsius to +40, but here's the thing, Leica tests it for temperatures beyond that range. I was bringing this camera inside the warmth of my suite into freezing temperatures, into frigid environments and the cold seas with snow and rain, and this camera absolutely survived. We were going through these fluctuating environments over and over again, from hot to cold to freezing to wet to snow. It was Odyssean in nature, and somehow the camera kept working. No matter what was thrown at it, it would keep delivering. None of the functionality felt like it was being hindered by the environment that I was in. SL cameras have this reputation for being quite durable, but even this experience surprised me that weeks and weeks at sea, this camera continued to over-deliver. Now, this review wouldn't have been possible without the sponsor of this video, Quark Expeditions. They specialize in polar adventures. They orchestrate these trips to the Arctic and Antarctic throughout the calendar year. Now, I thought they were in the business of these luxury, posh trips, and it is far from that. They are in the business of delivering bucket list adventures. Every expedition is led by this really talented, robust team of experts that are looking to deliver an experience unlike any other before. You're going to be on the ship with glaciologists, ornithologists, and adventurers and expedition leaders that have years, if not decades, of experience. I thought I wasn't a cold weather and landscape person, but my trip with them shattered that belief. I had the adventure of a lifetime, created some of my best work, and truly learned new things about myself. If you're looking for the voyage of a lifetime, a new kind of challenge that you want to add to your bucket list, visit Quark Expeditions today and speak to an expert. The SL3 is released at a time where there's a lot of maturity with the L-Mount Alliance. There are so many lenses you can choose from many reputable manufacturers. But if you really want to take advantage of this camera, you should invest in at least one premium SL lens from Leica. These are the best modern lenses that are coming out of Germany, and they are over-engineered where it can resolve sensors beyond 100 megapixels. And there's something being done here where the aperture rating you see on the label is not exactly the character and behavior you're gonna get when you shoot, wide open especially. You know, I would use my 24-90, and even shooting at f4, people would be surprised that this was not a larger aperture. It's great that you can adapt your M lenses and really maximize what they can do with modern imaging technology. It's great that you can get specialty and niche lenses from the other manufacturers in the L-Mount Alliance to expand your storytelling ability. But I will say, if you are getting a camera like this, you really got to make room to get at least one really nice SL lens for the stories that you're telling, because it's going to just allow you to get the most out of the solution. Before I talk about how this camera can get better, I want to talk about this camera relative to the Leica SL2, because why would you pick an SL3 over an SL2? I think it really comes down to speed. There's a ton of upgrades here, but it all culminates into this speed advantage that makes the SL3 so valuable over the SL2. If you are constantly producing work, if you are constantly on the go, if you are in very dynamic environments, or you're dynamic in your approach, you're gonna value the SL3 more than a Leica SL2. The difference in price, well, that's gonna become negligible over time. Now, if you are in very controlled environments, often in the studio, very methodical in your approach, and you just have a bit more time to create your shots, well, the SL2 will be enough. I've also got to talk about the medium format sized elephant in the room, and it's the question I've been getting a lot when people found out I was testing this camera. Does this replace my medium format imaging solutions? You see, when I'm approaching a job, I'm usually picking the best tool for the job. And more often than not, the best tool is gonna win out. So when I looked at this camera and I was testing it, there were a lot of environments where it just felt better than medium format because of how quick it could be or how close the file could get. Especially if I'm using narrower apertures, you just couldn't really tell the difference, especially the client. Now, there were some instances where the client might request a medium format solution, or the specific creative, well, it was just going to look different on medium format. In those instances, yes, I would just default to a medium format solution. Where I've landed now is that I'm reaching for the medium format less as I have a Leica SL3 available, especially in these studio environments when I'm using the best glass I can with this camera. It really gets me close to those medium format solutions. There are instances where if we're really wide open that you're gonna see a little bit of a difference in that medium format result, but those margins are getting slimmer and slimmer. And when you can just work a lot faster and work in more trickier environments, well, ultimately you want to be able to get the shot, then miss it altogether. So now that we talked about all the great things that this camera can do, it's time to talk about how this camera can get better. And I thought, why not start this conversation on YouTube's favorite talking point on cameras, autofocus. Like I mentioned earlier, the autofocus has improved, and especially in well-lit environments, it gave me consistent results. I would point this thing at my subject and it would acquire focus. As my subject was moving, it would move along with it. And there will be these instances that felt damn near impossible to get focus, and it would get focus. The real challenge I see here, and this is probably because of how much resolution is going across the sensor and how much information needs to be processed, is that in some situations that felt, quite simple, quite easy, the autofocus would shift, it would miss. If I was using it for video with continuous face tracking, there were times where it would just kind of shift in the middle. It didn't happen a lot, and it definitely didn't happen as much as my Leica SL2S, but it happened enough where it kind of left me with a question mark. And what made this question mark bigger is that, well, let me give you an example. I was on a moving boat with the SL 100-400 lens with a teleconverter zooming out, and I was seeing this kittiwake in flight. And we were, moving quite a bit on this boat. It's moving forward, it's moving up and down. I had the beta autofocus for wildlife tracking on, and it caught this bird. I saw the little rectangle around it, had it in focus. I was tracking it, fired a couple of shots, and got a perfectly in focus shot of this bird. And in that moment, I'm like, wow, this autofocus is phenomenal. And then I would bring the camera back, put on the 24-90 lens, put it on a tripod, throw on a light like this, try to record a voiceover, and it would hesitate sometimes. It would just kind of like shift, not a lot, but every now and then where I'm like, okay, maybe I gotta put some B-roll over that moment. So I would love to see this camera's autofocus algorithm just get tweaked over time. I don't think it's a hardware issue now. I think it's just about iterating on the algorithm itself to just get it a little bit more consistent. So the autofocus with the SL3, significantly better than before, will often surprise you in what you can do, but as soon as you go to video and you're relying on continuous autofocus, you might hit some roadblocks. Leica is known for their design, especially when it comes to menus, and I've told you how much I'm enjoying the new user interface. The one thing I would like to see them change, well, I shouldn't even say like to. They actually told us that they're going to change this over time and tweak it, but it's the video settings menu, where you go in to actually choose your video settings and frame rates and all that kind of stuff. They're going to iterate on this over time. I have some ideas for this. I will not throw it in this video. I'll just say that I'm excited to see what this becomes in the months and years to come. The battery life on this camera has marginally gotten better. It's a higher capacity battery that's being used here than the predecessor, but that doesn't necessarily equate to like a linear improvement in overall battery life. So I'll just say this, I think there needs to be some efficiencies built in. These are new components, new parts, and just overall a new product compared to the Leica SL2. So I'd love to see this battery just have more efficiencies built in over time. I could get through a very tough photography session, you know, the better part of 8 hours when I was just relying on photography. But as soon as I pivoted to a video workflow, and especially solely video, well, it was really about 2 to 3 hours of use. So I think there is a good amount of efficiencies that can be built out to address this gap. Something that I didn't realize till much later as a Leica SL2S owner is that Leica has actually published the white pages to L-Log, right? The format that they use for video capture. Now, this is great, and a lot of professional companies that are serious about video do this, but I'd love to see Leica either expand this document or release another document that just talks about best practices for using a Leica SL camera for video production, the best settings for the best environments, and how to adapt to changing situations. And on the topic of video, I don't know if all of this is possible, but well, some of it might even be impossible, but I thought I'd list out some of the video features that can be introduced to really flesh out what this camera can do. Things like false color, USB SSD recording, displaying the user interface via HDMI, vector scopes, 4K ProRes recording, anamorphic D-squeeze options in camera, project timelines that are independent of frame rates, 32-bit audio, probably not possible, ARRI Log C3 license options like we see on the Lumix, open gate recording, and even Netflix certification. Look, I'll admit the last few things, they kind of feel impossible, but I'd love to see Leica just sort of work at this list and see if they can bring it to the SL3. These are things that are geared toward professionals, but again, we're talking about a professional imaging solution. With all that said, I would trade every upgrade that I mentioned in this segment so far for one thing. And that one thing is something I call Leica Professional Services. Imagine a department that you can deal with where if something goes wrong with your camera and you're a professional, that you can just call this number or you can email them and you're getting a response within 24 hours, maybe within a few hours, and there is a resolution built out for you, where you can send in your camera, you'd have a loaner sent to you, you have a discount on repairs, you'd have priority repairs. This is something that, similar to other manufacturers, it would not be free. It would be something that you pay into annually, but you would just see this enhanced service for professional photographers and videographers. This is not easy to do because you're effectively creating a new company inside an existing company, right? So look, I'm not trying to make it sound like it's something that can be done overnight, but I think the time to get it done is now. You have all these solutions that are more robust, that can do more things. And you know, as much as people want to say that professionals don't use Leica for work, this is largely from the uneducated. When you become a Leica user, you start to discover more Leica photographers, and you start to discover more professionals that rely on these solutions for the stories that they're telling. And it would be great to have this service for those people where, you know, especially when you're on location and you need to get the job done, you have a department you can reach out to help you finish the story. Now, let's talk about how the Leica SL3 compares against the market. Depending on how you define it, the Leica SL3 either has no real competitors or an army of them. When you prioritize the feel of this camera, the durability, the user interface, the optics, the app integration, there is no competition. If those are the things that are important to you and the stories that you're creating, there's nobody else that confidently ticks all of those boxes. And if you feel differently, let me know in the comments down below. But if you change the definition into something that's more quantitative, where it's more about the specs, the speed, well, suddenly the competition opens up, right? When you're looking at these premium high resolution imaging solutions that have really good autofocus and video features, there is a lot to choose from. Here's the twist though. Leica isn't really looking to compete in this conversation. If your work or your storytelling is really gonna be defined by 2 or 3 key features, then yes, you make a decision for that and, well, enjoy your journey. Even with all the advanced features that the SL3 provides, the priority for Leica is really built around these intangibles that flesh out the experience of the photography itself. The Leica SL3 expands the imaging market by positioning competitive imaging features in an alternative user experience that caters toward proficient, design-centric photographers. And well, on that note, let's talk about who's gonna get the most value out of a camera like this. The Leica SL3 is a true evolution from the predecessor. From the sensor to the screen, everything has been upgraded with this camera in a manner that really speaks to what a modern mirrorless solution should feel like, going into especially that upper tier of imaging tools. Regarding the question of have they done enough? The short answer is yes, but like I've said in the past, you're not interested in the short answer if you've made it this far. As some of you may have noticed, the profile of Leica has grown exponentially over the years as they've released more and more products. And with that, there seems to be this convergence of a lot of YouTubers and influencers that are now talking about the brand, because there is a bit of this expanded growth where a lot of people are grasping at relevancy by expanding the topics that they discuss. So they either have the reach, the funds, the opportunity to talk about Leica products as well. And with it comes a lot of individuals that bring a lot of chauvinism, hyperbole, and clickbait to discussing the brand. And you have this volume of it that often outnumbers journalists and photographers that have been qualifying these Leica solutions for many years. There's been no shortage of conversations around this camera, and a lot of it sounds like forcing a camera-shaped peg through an insecurity-sized hole. Individuals see the specs, the price, the red badge, and suddenly an opportunity appears to inject some excitement in their life while creating fresh content for an oversaturated audience. Again, dudes are flocking to Leica to fill a gap in their life, be it real or imagined. The only problem I'm seeing is the gap isn't one of technology, it's a gap in self-discovery. If you precisely know what you create, where you create it, how often you create, and how you create your stories, you'll know if the Leica SL3 is for you. This is a camera that serves a very narrow market by design. It's not meant for those that are lacking in creativity and tickled by the latest features. This is a camera that caters to those that know exactly what they want to create and care a lot about how they get there. When I think about who would benefit most from a Leica SL3, I'm thinking about people that are incredibly intentional with their work, incredibly intentional with their color in their work, people that are on the go a lot, traveling the world, traveling to different locations, different environments to create new stories. I'm thinking about people that think about lenses more than they think about sensors. And I also think about people that are constantly turning over new work and new heights to their work, both for themselves and for their clients. If those 5 things really speak to you, then I think the Leica SL3 is something that you should consider. Now, there might be some specifics that disqualify you from considering this camera, perhaps if you're going to Paris to cover the Olympics, but it is not to say that this camera doesn't have an audience. Quite far from it. It speaks to a very specific audience that almost need this over everything else.